Hello, everyone. Welcome to the SocaMom Summit. We are about to talk about mental health right now. This is the check-in. It's been 3 months since COVID-19 hit us hard. We know that it was around in January, but we really started feeling it and being in quarantine, stay-at-home orders, safer at home orders about 3 months ago. We're going to talk about what it looked like back then and what it looks like today, because things are changing so rapidly. Even within that, we have the resurgence. Well, not that it ever went away, but the Black Lives Matter movement that's now coming with protests and meaningful change. And we still have everything else going on. So we're going to check in and see what we might be dealing with 3 months later. So I have 2 experts here to talk with you today, and I'll have them introduce themselves. I will start with Tasha.
Thank you. So my name again is Tasha Fletcher. I'm a licensed clinical social worker. I'm also the founder of the private practice Wellness Tree Counseling Services. And as a therapist, I specialize in working with communities of color to address a variety of mental health concerns. But specifically, I focus with working with clients who are experiencing whether that be depression, anxiety, stress, or trauma-related symptoms. I'm also a holistic life coach, and as a coach, I work with clients who are eager and motivated to make significant changes in their lives. However, we know that it's never easy to make changes, so often clients may experience anxiety or worries about that. And so I use an intuitive approach, which really helps clients to tap into their inner guidance and utilize that guidance to bring about significant changes in their lives.
And Seneca, tell us about yourself.
Definitely. Hello, people. How are you doing out there? I'm Seneca Williams. I'm also known as Coach Sen, and I'm a licensed mental health counselor and a coach. I support women careerpreneurs and entrepreneurs in beating business anxiety and business burnout. Most of the people that I see, they are dealing with anxiety around starting businesses, upgrading their careers and their lifestyles. I also deal with a lot of life transitions as well, and how to work through things like imposter syndrome, being an introvert, social anxiety, building self-confidence. So for those of you who may not know, I originate from St. Vincent and the Grenadines. So represent, grew up in Brooklyn, but now in the Sunshine State. I'm in South Florida.
And I'm jealous. I'm always jealous when you tell me where you are. At least this time you didn't go outside.
Yes.
Okay? Or sit in front of the window and be like. So where were we 3 months ago? Let's just kind of go back in our minds. Where were we? What were we feeling? And what were some of the things that your clients were dealing with 3 months ago? We'll start with Seneca.
So 3 months ago, if you notice, do you remember when we did this 3 months ago, I had more hair?
I did notice, and it's adorable, but I'm like, she looks different.
Yeah, different. I had a corona cut.
Listen, my daughter had a corona cut too.
Listen, totally accidental. Didn't mean for it to happen, but I was doing my daughter's hair and she was doing my hair, and we were trimming each other's ends, and she trimmed too. So,
but it looks good on you. So there's that.
It does, yes.
So that was part of the being on shutdown and lockdown. We had to do a lot of things for ourselves that we never did before, like our own hair. We were cooking our own food, entertaining ourselves. So 3 months ago, when I think back, there was so much uncertainty and fear around what are we going to do and how do we get through this and what does this all mean and how do you manage being a mom, right, working from home while having to homeschool. So it was definitely an ordeal. I know for myself, I dealt with a lot of anxiety around worrying about my clients and how they were experiencing things. The good thing for me is I always was an online therapist and my clients were already used to being online, but I got a lot of new clients, like a influx of clients. They talk about the pandemic being COVID, but mental health, I say, is the silent pandemic because the amount of referrals that I would get in one day was unbelievable. And I never experienced anything like that. And then managing my mental health, my daughter's mental health, it was a lot. But overall, I was okay with being at home. But I know for many people, that was really hard, not going out, not being social, feeling isolated. Or some people, I work with a lot of women who live by themselves. They didn't even have family around them. So they were home by themselves. So it definitely was a very interesting time 3 months ago, trying to figure out this new thing, these uncharted territory that we were dealing with.
So, Tasha, what did you see that, stood out to you 3 months ago with your clients?
Yeah, very similarly, like Seneca, a lot of my clients were not only trying to make sense of it for themselves, but for what it means for their family life. I see a lot of women and women who are parents, whether that be a two-parent household or a single-parent household. But what does it mean for people who rely on school systems and childcare services in order to make ends meet? So a lot of the anxiety wasn't just processing what is this COVID and what does it mean to live in a pandemic in 2020, but how do I adjust to this and how do I make sense of things that I have never had to do in my life? And what do you mean I can't go out? In therapy, a lot of what we do is we help clients to build coping skills, and sometimes those coping skills may be going for a walk or going, getting physical workout, physical exercise, and really having to be innovative and creative. How do I maintain, my coping skills? How do I maintain my mental health when there's so many restrictions and limitations, when there's so many uncertainty? Even for myself personally, the first few weeks in, I remember feeling angry. I remember feeling frustrated. I remember feeling sad, but I remember also waking up one morning and saying that I can't continue on with the same rules and the same structure and the same guidelines that I was using to make it through my day prior to COVID. And so, what do I need to make adjustments to? So, a lot of it is, yes, I'm experiencing this anxiety, but how do I adjust? How do I adapt? And as humans, for the most part, we're adaptive. When given the right tools and support, we're able to adapt. And, 3 months in, while clients have adapted, but as you shared earlier, there are new anxieties coming up in the midst of the pandemic. So it's really just figuring out what it means for us and how to make best sense of it.
So when you say new anxieties, the world is opening back up. Some places more quickly than others.
Right.
So now we have, on top of the anxiety of needing to stay in and wanting to go out, we now have the ability to go out, and everyone is going out, right? So I've heard people say, I have a terrible time going to the grocery store. I come back, I have to go to sleep. My ice cream is melting because I just can't manage it anymore. So we have things that we never even considered that could be problems that are now weighing on us. Seneca, what are some of the things you've started seeing that we should be aware of in ourselves? Like those little anxieties, like going to the grocery store, or I can't find my mask, or all things like that.
What I have noticed, some people that have been inside for that amount of time, they kind of got used to it, so used to it that now going back outside seems scary to them. So they have this new anxiety of, how do I reintegrate? How do I go back and re-enter the workplace? I didn't even realize how many people did like online deliveries for groceries. So I spoke to people who did not leave their homes, literally did not leave their homes for 3 months. Like they didn't go for walks, they didn't go to the grocery store, they didn't go anywhere. And now they're trying to figure out, well, they want me to come back to work. What does that look like? How do I show up? So I've been telling people, let's go back and think about how to create safety for yourself, and creating like routines for yourself to feel safe. Those who are going out to work, like healthcare workers and first responders, they already had their routines during that time. Like they told me they would take their clothes off at the door or take their clothes off before they entered the house. They would wash their hands outside, and they had these different routines. So I've been sharing that with people now who are going back outside, like, okay, create a safety plan for yourself. What are the things that you can do to make sure you feel safe when you go out? And then when you come back in, and as far as the grocery store goes, my time is Monday morning when it's quiet and there's not too much traffic and not too many people there. I know I have that luxury because I make my own schedule, but think about the days and times that you're going to these public places and schedule it at times where it's not high traffic.
Tasha, what have you been seeing as far as people trying to get back outside?
Yeah. And so, it's interesting because I have a lot of clients who entered therapy with me as a result of the pandemic. And so this is their first episode with anxiety in their lives. And so people often mistaken that, okay, this anxiety that I'm feeling is going to go away. It's going to resolve itself as soon as the pandemic resolves, and that I don't need to continue my grounding exercises. I don't need to continue these things that have been helpful for me in the past 3 months. So right now, a lot of my session is shifting from, okay, now that we've made it into the pandemic 3 months in and you're managing, it's how do we continue the things that are happening for you right now post pandemic, because we know that there's a new normal coming again. And so reminding people that these skills aren't just specific to living in a pandemic. The other thing that I'm noticing is that in staying home or staying, not socializing the way we are accustomed to, that human interaction, that face-to-face interaction that was lost as a result of the shelter in place, people are having difficult times remembering basic social skills. Even myself, I laugh because I was, taking a walk one day and I noticed a familiar face at a distance and I felt my heart pound a little bit. And I realized I didn't know how to greet this person any longer. And I didn't share earlier, I'm actually here in New York City. And so, as a New Yorker, we're really touchy feely, huggy, when we're greeting one another. And so not having to utilize those social skills for the past 3 months, it's true what they say. When you learn a skill, you use it or you lose it. And so a lot of my therapy right now feels like, social skill one-on-one with adults, and they're appreciative of it because we're now having to shift how we interact with one another in outside world. And what does it mean to run into a peer or a friend in public? And so having those transparent conversations that we probably didn't have to have before, and utilizing some of that assertive and effective communication, because sometimes people don't realize that maybe approaching someone or getting too close into someone's personal space is something that triggers their anxiety. And if it didn't trigger it before, a lot of people are finding that new triggers are coming up. Triggers that they thought they dealt with are coming up for them as we re-enter the social world again.
So one of the things that I'm noticing as well is that not only do we not know how to interact with each other because we haven't really been with each other for 3 months, but now we have this suspicion of each other
Right.
that we didn't have before. there were people that would pass me on the street. I didn't notice half the people in the grocery store. You know, they could have hit me with the cart before I ever knew they were there. But now we're looking behind us, we're looking in front of us, we're like, who's next to me? Did you sneeze? So we're hyper aware of our surroundings. But also, we have the protests. So not only are we wondering if someone is infected or if someone is not, you know, being socially conscious with their sneezing and coughing and just being actually like, you're not 6 feet from me or whatever.
Yeah.
Now we're wondering, what are they thinking? Is this person racist? Is this person all lives matter? Is this person Black lives matter? Is this person protest? Or was this person looting yesterday? You know, now we are so worried about other people. What are some of the things that we can do moving forward to kind of get over that or work through that? Because right now there's no way around it. Seems like we're going to have to go through it. So I'll start with Seneca.
Okay, so I kind of mentioned it before. You're absolutely right. There's a lot of hypervigilance right now based on, first of all, protecting ourselves from COVID, which people are still getting. They are still getting sick from it and they're still passing away from it. I recently had a family member pass away last week from it. So it's very real. And you're absolutely right. We're very aware of touch. I was in a phone store the other day, and the sales lady, she was handing me something, and I noticed that I opened a bag and like for her to like put it in the bag. No, you know, like let's not touch each other. So, you know, you're absolutely right. Because in the past, I probably wouldn't have thought of that. Like, let's not touch each other. You know, that is me creating safety for myself, or even telling people like, please don't be offended if I don't shake your hand or I don't hug you when I greet you. It's just been me setting boundaries for myself that makes me feel safe or makes my daughter feel safe. She's 13. She's very concerned about, you know, health as well. So that's one thing. The other thing is the hypervigilance about safety with racism and not knowing who's who and what's what and what's going on. And I'm in Florida. I am from New York, and I know it's kind of different depending on where you're from. The interactions and you know, the space and distance from seeing people. It's more crowded in New York. And I can only imagine in New York what it's like being on the streets. I actually have a fair amount of clients from New York and from Florida, and their experiences are a little bit different, but at the same time, they're very concerned and they're feeling a lot of stress. So we've been focusing on how to manage stress and self-care so that their emotions are more stable. And when their emotions are more stable from managing their stress and from practicing the self-care, they find that when they go out, they're not as anxious as when they just let their stress just go all the way up, or their anxiety. So it's been a lot of, let's focus on self-preservation, not watching these videos, not reading all the comments. You know how they say, I'm here for the comments? No, not here for the comments. Not going so deep into these discussions with people back and forth online, not engaging with people online that you're concerned they're racist and you're trying to change their mind. So it's really like self-preservation, self-care, stress management. So when they go outside, they're not like at that high level.
So Tasha, how has it been for you?
Very similar to what Seneca shared in terms of stress management, because we know that when stress levels are high, it sort of limits our ability to problem solve. It limits our ability to think with intention and act with intention. But something I'm also noticing as a trauma professional, this pandemic and now the civil unrest and some of the social and racial issues that are coming up are really opening a lot of unresolved wounds or unresolved traumas for people. And so when we're talking about hypervigilance, when we're talking about, our safety, it's also important to recognize when you're hypervigilant, when your sense of safety, or your gauge for safety is off balance, and that, although time is passing, these symptoms are not resolving or improving naturally, to seek support, and that it's okay to seek professional help during this time, because when stress is high, our bodies is responding to it. When, there are events happening in the world and we are responding to it, our bodies are doing what our bodies do. It's responding to abnormal situations, because, we didn't learn, prior to COVID coming, how to live in a pandemic. And so a lot of people's living, for the first time through a pandemic and learning. A lot of people have an understanding of racism and, the different race issues, but never really, had to navigate it firsthand or directly, like the movements are happening today. And so recognizing that if time is going by and you recognize that your symptoms or these different traits or behaviors are not improving for you, to seek support. A lot of my clients are really active in finding safe spaces. So finding a safe space to talk about what you're experiencing, talk about what you're thinking, and recognize when those conversations may not just be enough for you, and you need to turn to professional supports where you can learn the grounding, you can learn how to set healthy boundaries. Because you're right, Seneca, right now we all have to reevaluate our boundaries and reevaluate how our boundaries are effective for us right now or not, and deciding what to do when we recognize that the boundaries we were living with prior are no longer meeting our needs. And setting boundaries isn't easy. So that's something you can work through when you seek professional help, whether that's a therapist, whether that's a life coach, but someone who could really support you through it, because it's a lot to take in on your own. And that what we are feeling, what we're thinking is completely normal. And it's our body responding to very abnormal environmental factors.
So, Seneca, when we're thinking about what is normal, Tasha said, feeling normal. When we're thinking about what that is, a lot of us are looking at social media and we're seeing people who live seemingly normal lives. They're living pre-COVID lives.
Mm-hmm.
And we're still looking at that as they must be okay, because that's what I recognize. That's what I believe my life should be like. How do we overcome this new sort of envy? Like, we want to be normal so badly, but our environment is absolutely abnormal. There's nothing normal about what all of us are going through.
Well, that is a good question, and so many things I could talk about. First of all, I love social media, but also I don't love social media. I've actually been telling many of my clients to take social media detoxes because there's so much going on social media. It's overwhelming, even for myself. You're right. There are some people who look like they're living their best life, like it was pre-COVID. Some people are angry. Some people, are attacking others. There's so much stuff going on social media. It's very noisy. So many people, I've been telling them, do a social media detox. The other thing is, sometimes I ask people, what do you think normal is, or what is normal for you? I tend not to use the word normal, even though I know people were saying new normal a lot when we were dealing with COVID, because what is normal in one household may not be normal in another. What is normal for you may not be normal for another person. So I ask people to define for me what is their normal, what was normal for them. And then from there, we work on, okay, well, what things aren't normal anymore? And sometimes people will say, well, I notice I don't sleep. I have a lot of headaches. My body is aching me. I'm nervous to go into my job. I feel concerned about that. I'm uncomfortable having these conversations with my coworkers about racism. All these things for them are not their normal. And then we talk about, well, what would you like to create? What would you like your normal now to look like with what's available, with what is possible, with what you're capable of doing? And then we come up with a plan for what normal is going to be now, not 6 months from now or 10 years from now, but right now to get through this. What is normal going to look like? And then we plan that. And sometimes it's, I want my normal to be, I get a good night's sleep and I'm not, up worrying about the news. I want my normal to look like me getting some exercise and getting my appetite back. I want my normal to look like me being confident enough to tell people at my job, I'm not comfortable with talking about racism now, or my friends to tell them, don't send me pictures or videos of these things. So we figure out what is normal, what do you want normal to look like, and then we plan it together.
And, as Seneca was mentioning, normal is a variable that it looks different for everyone. It looks different for every situation. So defining it is key. And also paying attention to what is coming up for you in this situation that perhaps you don't want to take into the new normal. And when we're talking about sleep issues, when we're talking about, the anxiety that you may be experiencing, the worries, I think it's also not only important that we pay attention to what we're consuming socially in terms of social media, but also what are we consuming nutritionally? A lot of my therapy approach consists of that holistic treatment. So although I am not a certified nutritionist, but there's a lot of connection between what we eat and how that impacts our mental health, how that impacts our mood, how that impacts anxiety. A lot of my clients were sort of required to show up harder than they were used to, whether it's because they're juggling multiple roles and responsibility. And so they're turning to caffeine, they're turning to certain foods that they're not normally accustomed to, or they recognize is not the best for them, but that's what they have given the situation, right? I don't want to go to the supermarket, so I have to open my pantry and use what I have. And so being mindful of what we consume and how that impacts our anxiety, how caffeine causes my anxiety to spike, and what can I do to improve on that? And also being mindful of what we're consuming mentally. So going back to the boundaries, that boundaries are not just physical things we put in place between us and other people, but boundaries are mental limits or restrictions that we put in place so that mentally we could be as mentally balanced as we could in given the situation. So, just really paying attention to what's happening to you in this current situation that you don't want to take into your new normal, and really looking outside of the what's the word that I'm looking for, outside of the everyday things that we can do, but what changes can I make that can really impact my new normal, whether that's limiting social media, whether it's changing, making diet changes, whether it's really letting my friends know that right now I really can't have this conversation because mentally I can't manage discussing what's happening in the news. And if you're working really hard to limit yourself on social media, you should also work hard to limit those conversations in our interpersonal relationships. And it might be helpful for one person to vent, but is me venting dumping for someone else? So being mindful of venting versus dumping.
So this has been an amazing session, kind of a check-in of where we were, where we are, and you two have other sessions during the summit. So one of the things that we don't really think about is that we still have hopes and dreams and plans.
Mm-hmm.
They may have been on pause for the last 3 months, but they're still there and they're bubbling under the surface. And with everything that's going on, you may need some help getting those things out, making the changes that you want to make, whether it be career, whether it be personal. So these two professionals have a special deep dive session for you. Please tell us what your session is. And everyone, if you want to know when it is and what you need to do to register, just go to SocaMomSummit.com, find it on the schedule, and all of the registration information is there. But can you give us a quick overview of what people will get from your class? I'll start